Pastor Jordan, along with, I know the Ansley Church and Mason City and Arnold have always been faithful supporters of Roger Williams Fellowship. And today, Opal had asked that I just come and kind of give you guys an update as to what's going on. And so that's what I'd like to do today. If you can't hear me at any point in time, just raise your hand, point at me, you know. But I'm going to try to talk, and then hopefully my last word will be when my throat gives out on me. So, but Roger Williams Fellowship, we just celebrated 50 years this last year, and it really is exciting to be a part of this ministry. With the completion of this next semester, I will have been on for 4 years, and a lot has happened in 4 years. When I came on, we had 4 or 5 students, and through God's blessing and through hard work, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today, we are averaging around 30 to 40 students, with as many as 50 on some gatherings. You know, Roger Williams has always kind of been known for its Monday night meal. Ever since, you know, when we were doing the archives in preparation for the 50th anniversary, we found that all the newspaper articles are always highlighted with the meals, the free meals for students, and that's always kind of been a staple of Roger Williams Fellowship. And while that's great that we're known for that, I always want to highlight that it's so much more than just a meal. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. But as you can see, this picture was taken last semester, but we're really having a great turnout. This is about half the room last semester. And the students are really coming, and the Monday night meal, while it continues to be kind of the staple of this ministry, the Monday night meal is really the start for us. And I just showed this picture to kind of show you a picture of our group. This is our largest meeting, but in the midst of this, we do lots of other things outside of just having that meal on Monday. And for those that were at the 50th anniversary, the slide is going to look familiar, and I kind of want to talk about that because then it catapults us into really understanding what we're doing. And after 4 years, and as the pastors and as faithful women of God, you know that we don't always get to see the fruit of our labor immediately. And that is a hard thing, you know, to continue to labor and not see any results. And so after 4 years, it's exciting to kind of start seeing some of those things unfold for this ministry, and I think that's why we've been so blessed. But the first thing I want to talk about is faith. And this is the model of what Roger Williams stands for today, and I'm assuming it's what it stood for a long time, but we've adopted this model. And everything starts with faith. And as faith, once we have this faith established, I'm talking about not only myself, but the students too. Once we have the faith established, then there's this desire to worship. And when I talk with the students, and when I get new students in, one of the first things that we do is individually, is we start talking about what is worship? What is this concept of worship? What does it mean? In today's society, worship can take all sorts of names. Worship can be identified as music. It can be identified as praising God. It can be identified as you know, the stuff we do before church. It can be identified as the stuff we do when we get to church, or just the simple act of going to church. And when I ask the students this, and these are the responses I get, I'll always tell them that's great, and I'll accept those answers, but that's not a biblical answer. You know, if you can't back it up with the scripture, then I'm not going to accept that, you know. And so this is a teaching moment for us. And I feel like this is key for my students. Half of my students come and they've grown up in the church and they have a faith, they have a background, and the other half of the students maybe have never sat in a pew or a chair or never attended anything. And so, you know, for the students that are Christians that come in and they say that they worship God, we give that a biblical definition, and this is really where things started. So we go to Genesis 22, verse 5, and through that, it's a familiar story, and it's Abraham and Isaac. And God tells Abraham in 22:1, now take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and sacrifice him. And we know how the story goes, but there's something really key in the middle of that. By the time God tells Isaac, or tells Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, then we see Abraham start prepping. And he goes and he gathers wood for the burnt offering, and he gathers together his donkeys, and he gathers together some of his servants, and they go out in search of this mountain that God promises to show them. And all of a sudden there's a key phrase, and it says, Abraham turns to his servants and says, stay here with the donkeys while I and the boy go up to worship, and then we'll come back to you. And the reason that this verse is so key is it's the first time we ever hear the actual word worship used. And so when we look at that, we say, well, this is the first time it's used. What's going on here? Well, really the biggest thing that we see is an obedience to what God is saying. You know, Abraham calls his obediency worship. And so from there we come up with this definition of worship is not about the songs. It's not about the emotion that can be provoked. It's all about being obedient to that which God says. You know, and so with that obedience, now the next question that's always asked is, well, what is it that God says? And I'm kind of taking you through, you know, some of this discipleship that we have been able to invest into these students. And so once they can grasp onto the concept that it's about being obedient to what God says, the question, well, what is it that I'm supposed to do? And we look throughout the Bible, and there are these principles. There are these over and over again, we see these same themes. And so we call these principles. And we have 8 main principles that we go through in the midst of our discipleship. And as a result of those, as a result of living the way God has commanded us to live, then we have this result of this character that gets built. And the character then has an influence. People of character have influence, you know, and that's in any society, in any culture. You know, and as a result, the influence leads us to an opportunity to evangelize. And kind of what I've just done is I've described a commission-minded ministry. Commission-minded, as Baptists, we often associate ourselves with the Great Commission. When Jesus tells his disciples in Matthew 28, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, see them baptized, and then teach them the things that I've taught you, and surely I'll be with you to the end. We've adopted that as our mission, as kind of the foundation. And so, you know, the first thing we do to non-believers is this evangelism. But evangelism won't be effective unless we do it God's way. And when we start doing things God's way, we see everything start to come full circles. We see for the first time in many years, Roger Williams Fellowship, we see people being baptized. We see students wanting to grow deeper in their faith, wanting to have that discipleship, you know, seeking that stuff out. Baptism, you know, is what we're commanded, but we talk about how baptism, while being a public display of what's going on, also, you know, is that first act of obedience. God tells us to do something, and we're going to do it. You know, we're going to be obedient. And so when we talk about commission-minded ministry, you know, then what we're saying as a ministry, we are committed to making disciples. We are committed to evangelism. We're committed to witnessing to the world, to those that don't believe or don't know who Jesus is and what he did for us on the cross. And when we're committed, and I keep saying we, because I think for the first time in a long time, the ministry is starting to be student-led. The students are actually saying, I want to be a part of this. And it's not necessarily Roger Williams Fellowship. It's being obedient to that which God says, you know, that we are being faithful disciples. We're being faithful Christians. And so as a ministry, we're committed to making those disciples, which means we're committed to witnessing. We're committed to evangelizing, whether that's as a group or whether that's individually, actually seeing students do this. And it's exciting. You know, of those that have ever been in ministry or ever tried to, be a part of youth ministry, college ministry, young adult ministry, it's hard to get them to do anything, And so all of a sudden now we're seeing this. We're seeing a passion grow inside of these students. And the second thing, seeing people baptized, obedience. And the third is teaching. And so then the big question is, so that what? So that what? What's the result of being this ministry? And that's why I'm here today, is to kind of show you. We're going to look at, I'm going to introduce you to Drew here in a second. Drew's got a video. But Drew's a student that, when I met him, he was really raw. He had grown up in a Baptist church over by North Fork area in Madison, a small Baptist church. He had great upbringing, but he needed to be sharpened. He was a Christian. He was committed. He was sure of his salvation, but the thing was, there wasn't anything that he was actively doing as a part of it. He wasn't producing any fruit, we might say. And as a result, Drew's a football player. He's popular. He's young. He's good looking. He's upward and he's mobile. And as a result of this, he's just kind of coasting through life. And when God put Drew and I together, Drew talks always about, you're constantly trying to get me out of my comfort zone. And I said, that's absolutely true. I am constantly trying to get you out of your comfort zone, because if we become content at any point, then we're not being effective. And Drew, going into his senior season now, we start to disciple each other. And, for these athletes, their sport is their God, or it becomes very close to an idol in their life. And Drew's whole reason for college and passion stemmed around football. And as we talked and as we grow and as he matures, he had a really awesome opportunity, and I'm going to let the video speak, and then I'll speak on it. So,
last year we had an assembly, a speaker.
Can you guys hear?
To the gym just here at UNK, and there were hundreds of students there. And there was a speaker named Jim Monroe, and he had a cool story. He was a leukemia patient, and he was told that he had a few months left to live, and his last chance was to find a marrow donor, so from the National Marrow Donor Registry. And he ended up finding one match out of the millions of people on the registry, and saved his life. So afterwards, after this, he got done, he had a call for people to come up and try to join the registry. It was just a simple cheek swab, and there were hundreds and hundreds of kids. They said that UNK had more people sign up for the registry than Lincoln, UNL, and Kansas State, and Iowa State. So all these big universities, UNK had a lot more people sign up. But a couple months after I signed up for the registry, I got an email from the match, so with the National Marrow Donor Program, and they said that my DNA matched a 36-year-old male with leukemia who needed my stem cells. And so I contacted him right back to him and told him I'd definitely be willing to do that. When I got the letter, it was cool and crazy at the same time. I was a little bit nervous because I knew that with donating marrow, you can miss your whole football season, and I could miss this whole season if he would have needed my bone marrow. But I was willing to do it. I would have been willing to put that guy's life over football, obviously, for the season. First of all, I had to go and do a bunch of blood work and physical and everything at UNMC, and then just basically make sure that I was physically capable and ready to donate, and that I was the perfect match for this guy. And so about a week before I donated, they needed me to start getting injections of a drug called filgrastim, and I got injections in my arms and stomach and thighs, and I had to do that every day for about a week. And that basically puts your bone marrow into overdrive and makes it create stem cells like crazy, just lots and lots of stem cells. And it makes you feel like you have the flu, like flu-like symptoms, like just sore and achy and tired and just don't feel good at all. But so that was a challenge, having to do that in the middle of fall camp, 2 days for football. So I had to go to practice feeling like that. So that was one of the worst parts about it. And then the night before I donated, I drove down to UNMC in Omaha, and the next morning I went and they hooked me up to a machine, both arms, and they pumped my blood, the entire volume of my blood actually, through a machine twice, and then I had to do it again the next day too. meant that this guy, he had leukemia and he had already been looking on the registry and there was no match for him on the registry, so he was out of luck until I signed up on the registry and popped up for him. And so she said it was for him an answer to his prayers, probably. They didn't tell me the name of the person or where he's from or any information other than that he's a 36-year-old guy who needs my stem cells to live. And they said he could be from Omaha or he could be from Africa, anywhere in the world he could be from. And so it's really neat just to know that I helped somebody out. So he's going to get my stem cells after he's done with his treatment. And that'll go into his bone marrow and that'll create completely new bone marrow in his body. And then from there the bone marrow will create a completely new immune system. So he'll pretty much have my bone marrow and my immune system living inside of him to keep him alive. So that's pretty neat.
I'm going to cut him off there. You know, something that's with Drew is we're seeing something that is somewhat of a rarity in young people. And I'm not saying that we don't see it at all, but you know, Drew, knowing the consequences or knowing that as a result of him being selfless and thinking about somebody else, you know, says, I'll help this person out. And in the video, there was a picture of all the auditorium there at UNK that was full. We had 20 or 2,000 plus students there, and that was actually an evangelistic outreach. You know, Jim Monroe is an evangelist that uses his story. He was a man that needed a stem cell, needed clean blood in order to live, and he uses that story as an illustration to talk about how Jesus' blood is the only blood that will save us. And Drew goes to this, and you know, he gets his cheek swabbed, and then he gets called in July, which is right around the time they start getting ready for a football season. And he's a senior, and so this is his year to shine. And he gets asked, do you want to forfeit your senior year so that you can help this man? And without a hesitation, Drew says, yes. Yes, I do. You know, because it's more important than that. And when Drew and I were talking about this decision, when we were meeting, you know, he'd said, I so want to meet this guy because I can tell him about how my blood is saving his life, but how there's an ultimate blood that saves all of our lives. And he's excited about the first part of the commission where we're going to go out and we're going to evangelize. And, you know, it's so exciting to see that, you know, as a result of him just taking ownership of his own faith and growing. And you can see Drew again here, and because of Drew and the growth that he's made in the last year, you know, he's dating a young gal named Sydney, and Sydney isn't a believer. And as a result of the way that Drew has grown and the way that Drew is investing in his own faith and investing in those around him, he has a significant impact on Sydney, who is now his fiance, which is exciting. But you can see on Sydney's face, and Sydney shared right before that about how having Christ in her life has brought her a joy that she never knew existed, and a peace that she never knew existed. And Sydney has already just hit the ground running. She's on fire, and you know, she is leading Bible studies with girls and getting girls together, and she's growing in her faith. And she said, I want what Drew has. And so she's found a great Christian woman to disciple her. And so we have growth. Drew his faith is starting to produce fruit now, and Sydney, her faith is starting to produce fruit, and we're seeing this. And so, you know, when we talk about this discipleship, there's this concept that's looming. You know, true discipleship is committed also to reproduction. And so, you know, when I talk about that, it's this constant fruit. You know, a disciple on fire continues to go out and make more disciples. You know, and then they continue to teach, and they continue to go along this path. But, you know, just to, you know, to talk a little bit about our ministry even more, you know, we did a recent survey in our young adult Sunday school class, and I didn't do it. But 20 surveys were handed out, and they had simple questions like, what is the gospel? What is the Bible for? What are your goals as Christians? And 19 out of the 20 surveys, there was a direct difference. There were 19 surveys that everything on there had everything to do with what they liked and what they didn't like about the church, about the Bible, what was the gospel. It had nothing to do with, there was no evangelistic tones. There was nothing that had to do with reaching out to people. There was nothing that had to do with making disciples. And there was one that hit all those, that hit every single one of those points. And the focus on this one survey was, making disciples. How do you want to grow? I want to know how I can be a better disciple. I want to know how I can invest in more people's lives. And that one survey, and I'm not bragging, this is completely what God has done, but that one survey was the one college student that we have been discipling with. It was a whole separate student. And her whole goal was about bringing others to Christ. That's her whole goal was, and so I'm not putting down those young adults, that answered in the other way, but there is this problem in today's society where there's a commitment to self or a commitment to the commission, and so with that, I want to change gears and I want to talk about another ministry that I'm involved with, and that's called Royal Family Kids Camp. And Royal Family Kids Camp is a camp that's specifically geared, it's specifically for abused and neglected children. And the study, the national study is that 1 out of every 4 girls is physically, emotionally, or sexually abused, in the school system. 1 out of every 4, so 25%. And 1 out of every 6 boys has been physically, emotionally, or sexually abused. And so this is a huge problem. And Royal Family Kids Camp is a very detailed camp, but it's a Christian camp. And what the whole point of that is to break this bad cycle and teach them this good cycle. It's a matter of saying this is not normal, and what's happened to you does not have to define you for the rest of your life. And so as a result of that, we try to teach them about God's love, and we implement lots of different things to talk about that. But with Royal Family Kids Camp, what's exciting is the number of students that have gotten involved in that, the number of UNK students. And just last year we had probably 15 UNK students. The year before we had 10, so that number continues to grow. But as a result, and I want to talk about Royal Family Kids Camp, and I've got a video that I want to show you about what we do. But as you're watching the kids, notice all the young people in the background, is what I want to talk about. And then as a result of this ministry, as a result of young men and women being committed to following that Great Commission, to going out, lives are being changed.